A Hat in Time is an indie-made 3D platformer, made to feel like it was ripped right from the 6th generation of gaming. It has a similar structure to Mario Sunshine, where you have to do the objectives in a set order, as opposed to something like Mario 64, where many of the stars could be gotten out of order if you knew what you were doing. Regardless, I had a great time playing through A Hat in Time in late 2021. The different areas felt unique and interesting, the dialogue can get surprisingly dark at points, movement feels smooth and responsive, and it just overall feels very tightly designed. Except for one specific act that has enough questionable design decisions which, in my opinion, prevents me from calling A Hat in Time a perfect game, and is what this whole video is about, that being Chapter 6, Act 2, Ship Shape, from the Arctic Cruise area, which is a part of the Seal the Deal DLC. This act sees you performing various tasks for the Walrus Captain around the cruise ship that this chapter takes place on. However, each task has a timer attached to it. Letting the red timer for the start of a task tick away makes the captain a little bit more irritated, and letting any timer run out completely makes him even angrier. If you let his irritation meter fill up completely, you must restart the act. A task involves bringing an item from one area to another. A red timer indicates the start of a task, and picking up that task starts a yellow timer, which is where that item must be transported to. And bringing the item to its yellow timer means you've successfully completed the task. If you can complete the set amount of tasks before the captain blows a gasket, you're entitled to the timepiece from the Lost and Found, and the act is complete. Starting this act fresh, you're given the same couple simple tasks around the kitchen, but from there, the tasks that you're given are randomly pulled from a list of possible tasks. This does mean that if the irritation meter fills up and you restart the main act right away, you're just given random tasks to start out, so it's almost better to completely restart the act and wait through the loading screen if you fail, so as to guarantee the same set of simple tasks appear first. However, some of these task indicators are ambiguous to a fresh player as to what location of the ship they relate to. I think it's best to learn these just by starting the shift and not actually focusing on playing, but rather taking the time to make the associations between the indicator and the locations yourself. Now, you're likely going to be inclined to complete every single task that you see, but I found that it's actually more advantageous to pass on picking up a task if it's far enough away, and if there's a group of other tasks that are closer, because you're still going to have an overall net gain of progress if you can pick up and complete the tasks that started closer to you, as opposed to risking picking up that farther away task that appeared first, and end up running out of time on the cluster of tasks, thus angering the captain even more. Basically, so long as you're completing some of the tasks, it's okay if you let some other tasks slip by the wayside. Let me reiterate that this is only the second act of this area, the first act being a leisurely fetch quest around the ship that I'm fairly certain is meant to get the player familiar with the layout, but this wasn't nearly enough time for me. Maybe if there were several acts before this that made me spend more time organically navigating the ship to do various things before throwing a timer on me, then it might have been better, but nope. I legit had to spend upwards of 2 hours just roaming around the ship to initially get my bearings. I would try to write out a whole map to show on screen so then you can study it, but I feel like actually loading up the ship shape act and just roaming around for yourself before you talk to the captain is a way better way to study the layout. Now, they tried to alleviate this by placing 3D maps of the ship around the place, but you still gotta study how each of these ambiguous green blobs are connected, because who the hell is gonna run over to one of these in the heat of completing tasks? One thing to note, the restaurant has an elevator at the opposite end from the kitchen that connects to the nursery, which is in turn connected to the pool rooftop. That took me way too long to figure that out, and it helped me a lot. Once you initiate the mission, you see these arrows on the ground. That's meant to point you in the direction of the nearest task, but they're so poorly implemented to where they could just divert you into a completely different route if you took a couple steps in a given direction, which sent me on a wild goose chase. They were screwing me up so much to the point where I realized I was better off ignoring the arrows altogether. Let's take a step back for a minute though. When you select an act to play from the hub, you get to look at this fun and unique title card design while the game loads up. This depicts what you're about to do in said act. This one does give you 2 hints as to how to make your life a little easier. One of them good, the other not so much. The first one is that Hat Kid is holding multiple stacked items, which is implying that you can carry multiple objects for multiple different tasks at the same time, even though it does start to mess with your controls. We also see hat kids sporting the sprint hat. If you don't know, you end up collecting several different hats throughout the game that you can swap between on the fly, and they all help you out in some way. In this case, the sprint hat makes you sprint, which you'd think is good for minimizing the amount of time you take between different tasks, right? Wrong. Another hat, the time stop hat, slows down time to a crawl, but you still move at normal speed, and in this act specifically, will also slow down the speed of the task timers. If you equip the badge that reduces usage cooldown for hat abilities, this means you can keep spamming the hat, which technically makes you move faster considering everything else is slowed down, and it gives you more actual time to think and react, rather than using the sprint hat and having to think fast in order to stay afloat. If this act was meant to be esoteric in design as to prime players for the Death Wish challenge mode, then sure, I guess that's understandable, but I don't think that's the case. The questionable and outright bad design of ship shape, mixed with how the RNG constructs the player thin, is bad difficulty. Again, I loved the rest of my playthrough of A Hat in Time, and I do highly recommend you all play it yourselves. It just really says something that if you Google A Hat in Time ship shape, you see two posts from two different people that would rather choose to no longer be alive over playing this act again. And also the acronym for Seal the Deal is STD.